The morning sun cast long shadows across the small cemetery as Maria stood beside the fresh grave, her 8-year-old daughter Lucy's small hand gripping hers tightly. 3 months had passed since that terrible night when the phone call shattered their world forever. Her husband Carlos had been driving home from his night shift at the factory when a drunk driver ran a red light. In an instant, everything changed. Lucy kept asking when Daddy was coming home, even though they had explained it countless times. The little girl would set an extra plate at dinner and save half her cookies for him. Each time broke Maria's heart. A little more. She tried to stay strong for Lucy, but some nights after tucking her daughter into bed, Maria would sit on their tiny porch and cry until no tears were left. Money was getting tight. Carlos had been the main provider in his life. Insurance barely covered the funeral costs. The small farm they lived on needed constant work that Maria struggled to manage alone. The chickens needed feeding, the vegetable garden was overrun with weeds, and the old tractor had broken down weeks ago. She had tried to fix it herself, watching YouTube videos late into the night, but her hands weren't strong enough to turn the rusted bolts. Lucy tried to help in her own way. She would collect eggs from the chickens and water the plants with her little watering can. But Maria could see the sadness in her daughter's eyes. The once cheerful girl who used to dance around the kitchen now spent hours sitting quietly, drawing. Pictures of their family with Daddy as an angel in the clouds. The bills kept coming. The electricity company had sent 2 warning notices, and the bank was asking about the mortgage payments. Maria had picked up extra shifts at the local diner, but even working double shifts barely covered their basic needs. She sold Carlos's tools, his fishing gear, and even his wedding ring to buy groceries. Each sale felt like losing another piece of him. Meanwhile, 15 miles away across the valley, a different kind of struggle was unfolding at the largest ranch in the county. Tom Rodriguez stood on his front porch, bouncing his 2-week-old daughter Sofia in his arms. At 6 feet 7 inches tall with shoulders like a linebacker, Tom looked like he could handle anything life threw at him. But holding this tiny baby made him feel more helpless than he ever had in his life. His wife Rosa had died during childbirth. The doctors said it was a rare complication that nobody could have predicted. One moment he was holding Rosa's hand, excited to meet their daughter, and the next moment his world had crumbled. Rosa was gone, and he was left with a newborn who needed constant care. Tom hadn't slept more than 2 hours at a stretch since bringing Sofia home from the hospital. He had hired a nanny, but she quit after 3 days, saying the ranch was too isolated and the baby too demanding. His mother lived 2 states away and couldn't leave his ailing father. His sister had her own young children and couldn't help for more than a few days at a time. The ranch demanded his attention too. He had 300 head of cattle, horses that needed training, and fields that required planting. His ranch hands were good men, but they couldn't make the big decisions. The cattle market was changing, and he needed to negotiate new contracts with buyers. But every time he tried to focus on work, Sofia would cry, and nothing else mattered. Feeding time was the worst. Sofia refused the bottle more often than not, crying for hours until she finally accepted it from exhaustion. Tom had read every parenting book he could find, tried different formulas, different bottles, different feeding positions. Nothing seemed to work consistently. He felt like he was failing his daughter every single day. The ranch house felt empty and cold despite its size. Rosa had filled it with warmth, laughter, and the smell of her cooking. Now it echoed with crying and felt more like a prison than a home. Tom found himself talking to Rosa's picture, asking her what to do, begging her to help him figure out how to care for their daughter. His friends and neighbors meant well, but their advice only made him feel more inadequate. The women would say things like, "Babies need a mother's touch," or "You should find someone to help with the feminine side of child rearing." The men would pat his back and say he was doing great, but he could see the doubt in their eyes. Everyone seemed to think he couldn't handle raising a daughter alone. Tom's business was starting to suffer too. He had missed 2 important meetings with potential buyers because Sofia was sick. His prize pool had gotten injured because Tom hadn't noticed the fence damage soon enough. The stress was eating away at him, and he knew something had to change soon. Both Maria and Tom went through their days like zombies running on coffee and determination. Maria would drive Lucy to school, work her shifts at the diner, come home to tend the farm, help Lucy with homework, and collapse into bed only to wake up a few hours later when anxiety about money kept her awake. Tom would tend to Sophia, check on the cattle, try to catch an hour of sleep, then start the cycle again when his daughter's cries pierced through his exhaustion. The community around them was small and tight-knit, but grief has a way of isolating people. Maria felt like a burden when friends offered help, and pride kept her from accepting charity. Tom felt judged by the other ranchers who seemed to manage their lives so effortlessly with their wives by their sides. Neither of them knew that fate was about to intervene in the most unexpected way. Sometimes life breaks people down so completely that they become open to possibilities they never would have considered before. Both Maria and Tom were reaching that breaking point, where desperation makes even the most unconventional solutions seem reasonable. The autumn weather was getting colder, and winter would bring new challenges for both families. Maria worried about heating bills and whether their old furnace would make it through another season. Tom worried about managing cattle in the snow while caring for an infant who seemed to cry more each day. Little did they know that a broken down truck on a lonely highway would soon change everything for both their families. Sometimes the most unexpected encounters happen when people are at their lowest points, when they're finally ready to accept help from the most unlikely sources. Maria and Tom were both proud, independent people who had always solved their own problems. But parenthood and loss had taught them that some challenges are too big to face alone. Their paths were about to cross in a way that would seem like divine intervention to some and pure coincidence to others. But anyone who knew their stories would agree that two people had never needed each other more, even though they didn't know it yet. The old pickup truck started making that terrible grinding noise again as Maria drove down Highway 47. She gripped the steering wheel tighter, whispering a prayer that it would hold together just long enough to get to town and back. Lucy sat in the passenger seat, her school backpack on her lap, humming softly to herself. It was one of those rare good days when her daughter seemed almost like her old self. They desperately needed supplies from town. The pantry was nearly empty, and Lucy had outgrown most of her clothes. Maria had finally saved enough money from her tips at the diner to buy groceries and maybe a few items from the thrift store. She had been putting off this trip for weeks, hoping the truck would somehow fix itself, but they couldn't wait any longer. The grinding noise got louder as they climbed the hill near Miller's Creek. Black smoke started pouring from under the hood, and Maria felt her heart sink. She pulled over to the shoulder just as the engine gave one final shudder and died completely. The silence that followed was deafening. "Mama, what's wrong?" Lucy asked, her voice small and worried. "Nothing we can't handle, baby," Maria said, trying to keep the panic out of her voice. But inside she was falling apart. They were 10 miles from town, with no cell phone service, and she didn't have money for a tow truck even if she could. Call one. She popped the hood and stared at the smoking engine, as if looking at it hard enough would reveal some simple solution. Steam hissed from the radiator, and she could see coolant pooling on the ground beneath the truck. This wasn't something she could fix with the few tools Carlos had left behind. Lucy got out and stood beside her mother, both of them staring helplessly at the broken engine. The highway was usually quiet during the day, with most traffic coming through in the early morning and late evening. Maria began to accept that they might have to walk, though the thought of Lucy's little legs carrying her 10 miles made her stomach turn. That's when they heard the rumble of a diesel engine coming up the hill behind them. Maria turned to see a massive black pickup truck pulling a cattle trailer. The truck was so clean it looked like it had just rolled off the showroom floor, a stark contrast to her rust-covered vehicle that was old when she and Carlos bought it. 5 years ago, the truck slowed down and pulled over behind them. Maria instinctively moved closer to Lucy, unsure about accepting help from a stranger. But when the driver's door opened and a giant of a man stepped out, something about his gentle Movements put her at ease. He was easily the tallest person she had ever seen, with work-worn clothes and kind eyes that immediately went to Lucy with a soft smile. "Looks like you folks are having some trouble," he said, his voice deep but gentle. "Name's Tom Rodriguez. I own the big ranch about 15 miles up the road." "I'm Maria, and this is Lucy," she replied, still keeping her daughter close. "The truck just died on us." "I think it's the radiator, but I'm not really sure." Tom walked over to look at the engine, and Maria couldn't help but notice how his massive frame made her small truck look like a toy. Despite his intimidating size, he moved carefully around Lucy, as if he was used to being gentle around children. "Yeah, that radiator's done for," he said after a quick inspection. "This old girl's not going anywhere today. Where were you headed?" "Into town for groceries," Maria admitted, embarrassed by their situation. "We don't have a cell phone, and I can't afford a tow truck anyway." Tom nodded understanding, and Maria noticed something in his expression that looked like recognition of their struggle. "Tell you what, why don't I give you both a ride into town? I was heading that way anyway to pick up some supplies." Lucy looked up at the gentle giant with curious eyes. "Are you a real cowboy?" she asked with the directness that only children. Possessed. Tom chuckled, a warm sound that made even Maria smile despite their situation. "I suppose I am, little lady. I've got cattle and horses and everything." "Do you have a cowboy hat?" Lucy continued, her shyness melting away. "Back in the truck," Tom said. "Would you like to see it?" As they walked toward his vehicle, Maria noticed an infant car seat secured in the back of the extended cab. The sight surprised her, and Tom caught her looking. "My daughter Sophia," he explained, his voice carrying a weight that Maria recognized. "She's 2 weeks old." "Oh," Maria said softly. "Where is she now? With Mrs. Patterson, my neighbor?" "She watches her when I absolutely have to leave the ranch." Tom's expression grew troubled. "It's not ideal, but I didn't have much choice today." Something in his tone made Maria look at him more carefully. Despite his size and obvious prosperity, she could see exhaustion in his face that matched her own. Dark circles under his eyes, the kind that came from weeks of interrupted sleep. His clothes were clean but wrinkled, as if he grabbed them without much thought. As they drove toward town in Tom's truck, Lucy chattered away in the back seat, asking him about ranch life. Tom answered patiently, describing the horses and cattle, in ways that made Lucy giggle. But Maria found herself studying the man beside her. His truck was expensive and well-maintained, but she noticed baby bottles in the cup holders and what looked like spit-up stains on his shirt. "How are you managing?" she asked quietly while Lucy was distracted looking at the horses in a passing field. "With a newborn, it can't be easy." Tom's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "Some days I wonder if I'm completely out of my depth," he admitted. "Sophia cries all the time, barely takes the bottle. I've got 3 nannies quit on me already, says the ranch is too isolated or the baby's too difficult." Maria felt her heart go out to him. "What about your wife?" "She died in childbirth," Tom said simply, his voice barely above a whisper. "Complications nobody saw coming." The truck fell silent except for Lucy's soft humming. Maria understood that kind of loss, the way it could knock the wind out of you and leave you gasping for air. "I'm sorry," she said. "I lost my husband 3 months ago. Car accident." Tom glanced at her with surprise and sympathy. "I'm sorry, too. That's got to be incredibly hard, especially with Lucy." "Some days I don't know how we're going to make it," Maria confessed, surprised by her own honesty. There was something about this stranger that made her want to share the burden she'd been carrying alone. They reached the grocery store, and Tom insisted on waiting while Maria and Lucy shopped. When they came out with their few bags, he helped load them into his truck without being asked. On the drive back to her broken-down vehicle, Lucy fell asleep in the back seat, exhausted from the excitement of the day. "You know," Tom said as they pulled up behind Maria's truck, "I've got some tools back at the ranch. Might be able to help you get this old truck running again." "I couldn't ask you to do that," Maria protested. "You've already done so much." "You're not asking, I'm offering." Tom looked at her seriously. "Sometimes people need help, and sometimes people need to help. Maybe we're both. As Tom helped transfer their groceries to Maria's truck, he seemed to be wrestling with something. Finally, as Maria was about to thank him and say goodbye, he spoke up. "Maria, I know this might sound strange, but would you mind if I asked you something?" His voice was hesitant, as if he was afraid of her reaction. "Of course," she said, curious about what could make such a large man seem so uncertain. "How do you do it? Take care of Lucy on your own, I mean. Make her feel safe and loved when everything's falling apart?" The question caught Maria off guard. She looked at Lucy, who was picking wildflowers by the roadside, then back at Tom's earnest face. "You just do," she said softly, "because they need you too. Because giving up isn't an option when someone depends on you completely." Tom nodded slowly as if her words confirmed something he'd been thinking. "Sophia won't take the bottle from me half the time. I feel like I'm failing her every day." "Babies are hard," Maria said gently. "Even with two parents, even when everything goes right, you're not failing her. You're learning." For a moment, they stood there in comfortable understanding. Two people who had been thrust into impossible situations and were doing their best to survive them. Neither could have predicted that this chance encounter would plant a seed that would grow into something neither had dared to imagine. But as Tom drove away after fixing Maria's radiator with surprising skill, both of them found themselves thinking about the other's struggle. Maria watched his truck disappear down the highway, feeling something she hadn't felt in months, hope that maybe, just maybe, they weren't as alone in this world as they'd thought. 3 weeks after the highway encounter, Maria was having one of the worst evenings of her life. The eviction notice lay crumpled on her kitchen table, the red lettering seeming to mock her every time she glanced at it. 30 days to come up. With 3 months of back rent, or she and Lucy would be homeless. The number on that paper might as well have been $1 million for all the hope she had of raising it. Lucy had been acting out all week. The grief counselor at school said it was normal, that children often went through anger phases when processing loss. But knowing it was normal didn't make it any easier when her sweet daughter threw tantrums, refused to do homework, and asked angry questions about why God took Daddy away. Tonight had been particularly rough. Lucy had screamed that she hated their life, hated being poor, and wanted her real daddy back. Not some pretend family. Maria sat at her kitchen table after finally getting Lucy to bed, staring at the pile of bills she couldn't pay. The electricity company wanted $200 immediately or they'd shut off the power. The phone company had already disconnected their landline. Her car insurance had lapsed, and the grocery money she'd saved was gone after Lucy had a meltdown at school and Maria had to leave work early, losing a day's pay plus tips. She had applied for assistance programs, but the waiting lists were months long. Her pride had kept her from asking friends for help, and Carlos's family lived too far away to be of much use. His parents had offered to take Lucy for a while, but the thought of being separated from her daughter made Maria's chest tighten with panic. Lucy was all she had left. The knock on her front door startled her. It was past 8 o'clock, and they rarely had visitors. Maria peered through the window and was surprised to see Tom Rodriguez standing on her porch, holding a crying baby against his massive chest. Even through the closed door, she could hear the infant's distressed wails. "Tom?" she said as she opened the door. "What are you doing here?" He looked exhausted, more so than when they'd first met. His shirt was stained, his hair was messy, and his eyes held a desperation that Maria recognized all too well. The baby in his arms was red-faced and screaming, her tiny fists waving angrily. "I'm sorry to bother you so late," he said, raising his voice over the crying. "I didn't know where else to go. Sophia hasn't stopped crying for 6 hours. She won't take the bottle, won't sleep, won't calm down no matter what I do. I've tried everything." "Come in," Maria said immediately, stepping aside. "Let me wash my hands." The moment Maria took the baby, something magical happened. Sophia's cries didn't stop immediately, but they softened. Maria began the gentle swaying motion. That came naturally to her, the same rhythm she'd used with Lucy years ago. She made soft shushing sounds and checked the baby's diaper, which was soaked. She needs changing, Maria said, carrying Sophia toward the couch. Did you bring supplies? Tom produced a diaper bag that looked like it had been packed by someone. In a hurry. As Maria changed Sophia's diaper and cleaned her up, she noticed the baby's obvious signs of hunger. The way she rooted around, the way her cries took on a specific pitch. When did she last eat? Maria asked. I've been trying to feed her for hours, Tom said, slumping into a chair. She takes a little bit, then spits it out and screams. The pediatrician says she's healthy, that some babies are just difficult feeders, but I feel like I'm starving her. Maria looked at the tiny baby, then at Tom's defeated expression. An idea was forming in her mind, one that seemed crazy but made perfect sense given their situations. She'd been breastfeeding Lucy when Carlos died, and her body had taken months to adjust to the change. Even now, she sometimes felt the phantom sensations of milk letting down when she heard a baby cry. Tom, she said carefully, this might sound strange, but I think Sophia wants to breastfeed. Some babies just prefer it, especially if that's how they started in the hospital. But her mother— Tom's voice trailed off, and Maria saw pain flash across his face. I know, but I still have some milk. Not much, but maybe enough to comfort her. Maria felt her cheeks flush at the intimate nature of what she was suggesting. I could try, if you're comfortable with it. Tom stared at her in shock, then looked at his screaming daughter. You would do that? For a baby that's not even yours? She's a baby who needs help, Maria said simply. And you helped us when we needed it. With Tom's grateful permission, Maria attempted to nurse Sophia. The baby latched immediately, her cries stopping as if someone had flipped a switch. The relief in the sudden silence was overwhelming. Tom actually started crying, his big shoulders shaking with emotion. I haven't heard quiet in 3 weeks, he whispered. I was starting to think I was the worst father in the world. As Maria fed Sophia, they talked quietly. Tom told her about the sleepless nights, the revolving door of nannies, the way his ranch was suffering because he couldn't focus on anything but his crying daughter. Maria shared her own struggles with the bills, the eviction notice, and Lucy's behavioral problems. I keep thinking Rosa would know what to do, Tom said. She was so excited about being a mother. She read every parenting book, had everything planned out. And here I am, can't even feed our daughter properly. You're doing better than you think, Maria assured him. Love doesn't come with instructions. We're all just figuring it out as we go. When Sophia finally fell asleep in Maria's arms, both adults were reluctant to break the peaceful moment. But Tom knew he had to get home, and Maria could see him gathering courage to say something important. Maria, he said finally, his voice serious, I have an idea and I want you to hear me out before you say no. She looked at him curiously, still holding his sleeping daughter. Your daughter needs stability, a father figure, and you need financial security, he began, speaking slowly as if he'd been rehearsing these words. My daughter needs motherly care, especially feeding, and I need help managing everything. What if we helped each other? What do you mean? Maria asked, though she had a feeling she knew where this was going. Tom took a deep breath. What if we got married? Not for love or romance, but as a practical arrangement. You and Lucy could move to the ranch. You'd have financial security. Lucy would have a stable home and a father figure. Sophia would have a mother's care, and I'd have help managing everything. Maria stared at him in shock. The proposal was so unexpected, so unconventional, that she didn't know how to respond. Marriage to a virtual stranger? It sounded crazy. But as she looked around her tiny house with its pile of unpaid bills, then down at the peaceful baby in her arms, she couldn't deny the logic of his suggestion. You barely know me, she said finally. I know you're kind enough to help a stranger's baby, Tom replied. I know you're a good mother who's doing everything she can for her daughter. I know you're strong and practical and not afraid of hard work. That's more than a lot of people know about each other when they get married. What about sleeping arrangements? Personal space? What would people say? Separate bedrooms, obviously. The ranch house has 6 bedrooms, plenty of space for privacy. As for what people say, they can think what they want. We'd know the truth. Tom paused, then added, "Look, I'm not talking about a fairy tale romance. I'm talking about two people helping each other through difficult times. Two families becoming one for practical reasons." Maria's mind raced. It was crazy, impulsive, probably the most ridiculous idea she'd ever heard. But it was also a solution to every problem she was facing. Lucy would have stability, education opportunities, and a father figure. She would have financial security and purpose. And Sophia would have the motherly care she clearly needed. "I need time to think," she said finally. "Of course," Tom said. "But Maria, that eviction notice on your table suggests time might be something you don't have much of." As Tom carefully took his sleeping daughter and prepared to leave, he turned back to Maria one more time. "I know it sounds crazy," he said, "but sometimes crazy solutions are the only ones that work. Think about it. If you're interested, come by the ranch tomorrow. Lucy can meet Sophia properly, see the place. No pressure, just think about it." After he left, Maria sat in her quiet kitchen, staring at the eviction notice with new eyes. Marriage, to Tom Rodriguez, would solve every immediate problem she faced. But was she ready to make such a huge decision based on practicality rather than love? And more importantly, what would be best for Lucy? One thing was certain: she had less than 24 hours to decide if she was brave enough to take the biggest risk of her life. Maria barely slept that night. She tossed and turned, her mind spinning with Tom's unexpected proposal. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the eviction notice on her kitchen table. Then imagined Lucy's face when she had to tell her they were losing their home. By dawn, she had made her decision. It might be crazy, but staying in their current situation was crazier. After dropping Lucy at school, Maria drove to Tom's ranch. The property was even more impressive in daylight than she remembered. Miles of white fencing stretched across rolling green hills, and the main house looked like something from a magazine. She almost turned around twice, feeling completely out of place. But the memory of Tom's gentle kindness gave her courage to continue. Tom answered the door, holding Sophia, who was fussing softly. He looked surprised but hopeful to see her standing on his porch. "I've been thinking about what you said," Maria began, her voice shaky with nerves, "about your proposal, and?" Tom asked, shifting Sophia to his shoulder. "I think we should talk about it. Seriously talk about it. But I have questions. Lots of questions." Tom's face broke into the first genuine smile she'd seen from him. "Come in, I'll make coffee." They settled at his large kitchen table, Sophia content in Maria's arms after a quick feeding. The house was beautiful but felt cold and empty, like a showroom rather than a home. Maria could see how a grieving man and crying baby would feel lost in all this space. "Before we go any further," Maria said, "I need to know this isn't just about desperation for either of us." Tom nodded seriously. "Fair question. Yes, I'm desperate. Yes, you're desperate. But that doesn't mean this is a bad idea. Sometimes the best solutions come when people stop pretending they can handle everything alone." "Okay," Maria said, feeling slightly reassured. "So if we did this, how would it actually work? Day to day, I mean." Tom pulled out a notebook, and Maria was surprised to see he'd already been thinking about the practical details. "I made some notes last night," he admitted. "Couldn't sleep either." They spent the next hour going through every aspect of what their arrangement would look like. Tom suggested that Maria and Lucy could take the entire east wing of the house, giving them privacy and space to maintain their own routines. He would handle all the major household expenses, while Maria would manage the domestic side of ranch life and help care for Sophia. "What about Lucy's school?" Maria asked. "She's finally settling in after losing her dad. I don't want to disrupt her education again." "The ranch is in the same school district," Tom said. "She could finish the year at her current school, then transfer to the ranch school next year if she wants. It's actually a better school, smaller classes." They discussed parenting styles, and Maria was relieved to find that Tom believed in the same gentle but firm approach she used with Lucy. He didn't believe in harsh punishments or yelling, which had been one of her biggest concerns. "What about Lucy calling you Dad?" Maria asked carefully. I don't want her to feel like she's betraying Carlos's memory. She can call me whatever she's comfortable with, Tom said immediately. Tom, Mr. Rodriguez, or if someday she wants to call me Dad, that would be an honor, but no pressure. Her relationship with her father's memory is sacred. The money conversation was awkward but necessary. Tom insisted on paying off all of Maria's debts, including the back rent, which would allow them to keep her little house as a rental property for extra income. He would also set up education funds for both girls and make sure Maria had her own spending money. I don't want charity, Maria said firmly. I need to contribute something real, not just be a live-in nanny. You wouldn't be, Tom assured her. Running a ranch household is a full-time job. Between cooking for the ranch hands during busy seasons, managing the house, helping with Sophia, and being there for Lucy, you'd be earning every penny. Plus, if you want to keep working at the diner part-time, that's fine too. They talked about what they would tell people. The truth seemed best, or at least a version of it. They would say they met, realized they could help each other, and decided to build a partnership. People could think what they wanted about the romance aspect. What about physical affection? Maria asked, blushing slightly. I mean, if we're married, people will expect to see some normal couple behavior. Tom considered this seriously. Maybe we start as friends and see what develops naturally. Hand-holding, sitting together, that kind of thing. Nothing forced, nothing that makes either of us uncomfortable. The hardest conversation was about the future. What if one of them met someone they truly loved? What if the arrangement stopped working? They agreed on a trial period of 6 months, with the understanding that either could leave if it wasn't working, but with enough notice to make alternative arrangements for the children. What about more children? Tom asked quietly. I mean, someday in the future, if things work out between us. Maria felt her cheeks burn. Let's see if we can make it through the first year before we worry about that. When it came time to pick up Lucy from school, Tom offered to come along. She should meet Sophia properly, he said, and see the ranch. This affects her as much as anyone. Lucy was curious but wary when she saw Tom waiting by Maria's truck. Her mood brightened considerably when she saw the baby, though. Is this your daughter? Lucy asked, immediately reaching for Sophia's tiny hand. This is Sophia, Tom said gently. She's 2 weeks old. She's so little, Lucy whispered in wonder. Can I hold her? Under Maria's supervision, Lucy carefully held the baby, her face lighting up with joy when Sophia gripped her finger. It was the happiest Maria had seen her daughter since Carlos died. The tour of the ranch was a revelation for Lucy. She was amazed by the horses, delighted by the chickens, and fascinated by everything Tom told her about ranch life. When he offered to teach her to ride, her excitement was impossible to contain. Mama, can we really live here? Lucy asked as they stood in what would be her bedroom, a space twice the size of their current living room. Maybe, Maria said carefully. Would you like that? It's like a castle, Lucy breathed. And Tom is so nice, and Sophia needs a big sister, doesn't she? That evening, back at their little house, Maria and Lucy had a serious conversation about the possibility of their lives changing dramatically. Lucy listened carefully as Maria explained in age-appropriate terms that Tom needed help with his baby and they needed help with their money problems. Would Tom be like a new daddy? Lucy asked. He would be a father figure, Maria said carefully. Someone who cares about you and wants to help take care of you? But no one could ever replace your real daddy. I know, Lucy said solemnly. Daddy's in heaven. But maybe he sent Tom to help us like an angel. The next morning, Maria called Tom with her answer. Yes, she said simply. But I have one more condition. What's that? We do this quietly. No big wedding, no fuss. Just us, the girls, and whatever witnesses we need at the courthouse. Done, Tom agreed immediately. When? As soon as possible. The eviction notice gives us 2 weeks. They decided on the following Friday, which would give them time to get the marriage license and make basic arrangements. Tom would handle paying off Maria's debts immediately, so she could focus on packing and preparing Lucy for the transition. As Maria hung up the phone, she felt a strange mixture of terror and relief. In less than a week, she would be married. to a man she barely knew, moving her daughter to a new home and taking responsibility for an infant who wasn't hers. It was either the smartest decision she'd ever made or the most foolish, but as she looked at Lucy, who was drawing pictures of horses and babies with a smile on her face for the first time in months, Maria knew she was making the right choice. Sometimes love wasn't about passion and romance. Sometimes love was about two people choosing to build something good together, choosing to take care of each other's children, choosing to be a family, even when the circumstances were unconventional. Friday couldn't come soon enough. The courthouse wedding was everything Maria had expected it to be, quick, simple, and slightly awkward. She wore her only good dress, a navy blue one she'd bought for Carlos's funeral 3 months earlier. Tom wore a clean white shirt and his best jeans, looking uncomfortable in anything that wasn't work clothes. Lucy held baby Sophia during the brief ceremony, both girls serving as their only witnesses besides the court clerk. "Do you, Maria Santos, take Thomas Rodriguez to be your lawfully wedded husband?" the judge asked in a bored voice that suggested he'd done this 1,000 times. "I do," Maria said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Do you, Thomas Rodriguez, take Maria Santos to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do," Tom replied, looking directly at her with those kind eyes that had convinced her this crazy plan might actually work. The kiss was brief and polite, more like a handshake with their lips. Lucy clapped anyway, delighted by the whole affair, while Sophia slept peacefully through her parents' wedding. 20 minutes later, they were walking out of the courthouse as husband and wife, legally bound together by practicality rather than passion. Maria's hands shook as she buckled Sophia into the car seat, the reality of what they'd just done hitting her all at once. Moving day came 3 days later. Tom had hired a crew to help, though there wasn't much to move from Maria's tiny house. Most of their furniture wouldn't fit in the ranch house anyway, and Tom had insisted on buying new things for Lucy's room. As Maria packed Carlos's photos and mementos, she felt like she was betraying his memory. Even though her logical mind knew he would want her and Lucy to be safe and provided for, Lucy was beyond excited, running from room to room in the big house, claiming her space and marveling at everything. Her new bedroom was 3 times the size of their old one, with windows overlooking the horse pasture and enough space for all the toys she'd never had room for before. "Mama, look!" Lucy called from the window. "The horses are right there. Tom said I can name the brown one." But the transition wasn't all excitement and wonder. That first night, Lucy crawled into Maria's bed at 2 in the morning, crying because everything smelled different and she missed their old house. Maria held her daughter close, fighting back her own tears of uncertainty. "Are we doing the right thing, baby?" Maria whispered. "I think so," Lucy sniffled. "But it's scary when everything changes so fast." Meanwhile, Tom was dealing with his own challenges. Sophia seemed to sense the disruption in their routine and was fussier than usual. She would only calm down for Maria now, which was both a relief and a source of guilt for Tom. He felt like he was failing as a father. By needing so much help with his own daughter, the local community's reaction was swift and mixed. News traveled fast in their small town, especially news as juicy as the biggest rancher in the county marrying a waitress from the diner just 3 months after both their spouses died. At the grocery store, Maria overheard 2 women talking in the next aisle. "I heard she trapped him," one whispered. Poor man was desperate for help with the baby, and she swooped right in. "Mark my words, she'd take him for everything he's worth." 3 months after her husband died, the other replied with disapproval. "Shameful, if you ask me. That poor little girl, being dragged into this mess." Maria's face burned with embarrassment, but she finished her shopping with her head held high. She knew the truth of their arrangement, and that had to be enough. The judgment wasn't limited to strangers. Carlos's mother, Elena, showed up at the ranch unannounced on their second week there, her face a mask of righteous anger. "How could you do this to Carlos's memory?" she demanded as soon as Maria opened the door. "How could you replace him so quickly?" "I didn't replace him," Maria said quietly, very aware that Lucy was playing nearby and could hear everything. "No one could ever replace Carlos. Then what is this?" Elena gestured around the grand house. You've moved on to a rich man before. My son is even cold in his grave. And you've taken my granddaughter away from everything familiar. The accusation stung because Maria had wrestled with the same guilt. Lucy needed stability, she said. She needed a home where she wouldn't have to worry about us losing everything. She needed her grandmother, Elena shot back. She needed family who actually loved Carlos, not some stranger who married you for convenience. Lucy appeared in the doorway, confusion and hurt written across her young face. Grandma Elena? Why are you yelling at Mama? Elena's expression softened when she saw Lucy, but her voice remained cold. I'm not yelling, Mia. I'm just trying to understand why your mama made these choices without talking to family first. Tom chose that moment to come in from the barn. Carrying Sophia? His presence seemed to fill the room, and Elena's eyes widened as she took in his impressive size. But instead of being intimidated, she drew herself up to her full 5'2" height. You must be the husband, she said, with barely concealed disdain. Tom Rodriguez, he said politely, extending his hand. You must be Lucy's grandmother. She's told me a lot about you. Elena ignored his outstretched hand. I'm here to take Lucy home with me for a while. She needs to be with real family. No, Lucy said immediately, surprising everyone with the force of her reaction. I don't want to go anywhere. This is my home now. Tom is teaching me to ride horses, and Sophia needs me to help take care of her. Lucy, Elena said in the patronizing tone adults use with children, you don't understand what's happening here. I understand that Mama was sad and scared, and now she's happy again, Lucy said with the brutal honesty of childhood. I understand that Sophia cries when I'm not here, and the horses know my name. I understand that Tom reads me bedtime stories and doesn't get mad when I ask about Daddy. Elena looked stunned by her granddaughter's declaration. But Mia, this man is a stranger. So was Daddy when Mama first met him, Lucy pointed out with 8-year-old logic. Now Tom is family too. The conversation ended with Elena leaving in a huff, threatening to call social services and get lawyers involved. Maria spent the rest of the day worried sick that they might try to take Lucy away, but Tom assured her that their marriage and stable home environment made that unlikely. Besides, he said gently, Lucy made her feelings pretty clear. No judge is going to take a child from a home where she's happy and thriving. The ranch hands were another source of anxiety for Maria. These men had worked for Tom for years, and she worried they would resent taking orders from their boss's new wife. Tom handled the introduction carefully, making it clear that Maria was now part of the operation and deserved the same respect they showed him. Most of the men were polite, but distant at first. They called her ma'am and tipped their hats, but she could feel their curiosity and judgment. It wasn't until she started cooking lunch for the crew during a particularly busy week that the ice began to thaw. Best cornbread I've had since my mama died, one of the older hands told her. Thank you kindly, ma'am. Slowly they began to accept her presence, especially when they saw how much happier and more rested their boss was with help at home. The biggest adjustment was learning to live with Tom himself. He was unfailingly polite and considerate, but they were still essentially strangers sharing a house. Mealtimes were awkward as they learned each other's preferences and habits. Tom liked his coffee black and strong, while Maria preferred hers sweet and light. He was an early riser who was often gone before dawn, while she was used to staying up late after Lucy went to bed. They developed a careful dance around each other, polite and respectful but not yet comfortable. Tom would ask permission before entering rooms Maria was in, and Maria knocked before going into any area she considered his space. They shared responsibility for the children but maintained their own separate routines otherwise. Sophia thrived under Maria's care, growing chubby and content. She began sleeping through the night regularly, which gave everyone more rest. Lucy flourished too, her confidence growing as she learned ranch skills and bonded with Tom, but Maria could see the little girl was still working through complex emotions about loyalty and love. One night, Lucy asked, Mama, is it okay that I love Tom too? I don't want Daddy to be sad. Your daddy wants you to be happy and loved, Maria assured her. He would be glad that Tom takes such good care of you. As their first month together ended, Maria reflected on how much their lives had changed. They were still finding their rhythm, still learning to be a family, but there were moments of genuine happiness mixed in with the uncertainty. When Lucy laughed at Tom's silly jokes, when Sophia smiled in her sleep after a good feeding, when the four of them sat on the porch in the evening watching the sunset, it felt like they might actually make this work. The community would talk. Elena would continue to disapprove, and they would all have to navigate the complex emotions of their blended family. But they were safe, fed, and learning to care for each other. Sometimes that was enough to build on. 3 months into their marriage, the Rodriguez household had found its rhythm. Maria woke each morning to the sound of Tom's boots on the kitchen floor as he prepared for his early ranch work. She would feed Sophia while he made coffee, and they would share a few quiet words about the day's plans before Lucy bounced downstairs, full of energy and questions about everything from horses to homework. Lucy had transformed from the sad, angry child Maria worried about into a confident little girl who couldn't wait to help with ranch chores. Tom had infinite patience with her endless questions, teaching her to brush the horses, collect eggs from the chickens, and even help with simple fence repairs. She wore her small cowboy boots everywhere and had convinced Tom to buy her a pink cowboy hat that she insisted made her look like a real ranch hand. "Look, Mama," Lucy called one Saturday morning, sitting proudly on Buttercup, the gentlest mare on the ranch. Tom walked beside the horse, one hand on the reins, the other ready to steady Lucy if needed. "I'm really riding," Maria watched from the porch, Sophia sleeping peacefully in her arms, and felt a warmth in her chest that had nothing to do with the morning sun. These were the moments that made all the awkwardness and uncertainty worth it. Lucy's laughter rang across the pasture, and Tom's face showed genuine pride in her progress. The bond between Tom and Lucy had grown stronger each day. He never tried to replace Carlos in her heart, but he filled a different space, one she hadn't even known was empty. When she had nightmares about the car accident, Tom would sit by her bed and tell her stories about brave horses and kind cowboys until she fell back asleep. When she struggled with math homework, he would patiently work through problems with her at the kitchen table, never making her feel stupid for not understanding immediately. Sophia, now 5 months old, had become the joy of the household. She giggled at everything Lucy did, reached for Tom's face with her tiny hands, and settled most contentedly in Maria's arms. The baby had filled a space in Maria's heart she hadn't realized was aching. Caring for Sophia felt natural and right, as if the little girl had always been meant to be her daughter, but their peaceful routine was disrupted one afternoon when a sleek red sports car pulled up the ranch driveway. Maria watched from the kitchen window as a beautiful blonde woman stepped out, wearing expensive clothes and high heels that seemed impractical for a ranch visit. Her heart sank when she saw Tom's expression change from confusion to something that looked like regret. "Who is that?" Lucy asked, pressing her nose to the window. "I don't know, baby," Maria said. Though she had a sinking feeling she was about to find out, the woman turned out to be Rebecca Morrison, Tom's ex-girlfriend from before he married Rosa. She swept into their kitchen like she owned the place, her perfume so strong it made Sophia sneeze. "Tommy!" she exclaimed, throwing her arms around him in a hug that lasted longer than Maria thought appropriate. "I just heard about Rosa. I'm so sorry for your loss." Tom gently extracted himself from her embrace, his face carefully neutral. "Thank you, Rebecca. That's kind of you to say." Rebecca's eyes swept over Maria and the children with barely concealed judgment. "And you must be the new wife. How dice?" Her tone suggested she found nothing nice about the situation at all. "I'm Maria," she said politely, shifting Sophia to one arm so she could offer her hand. Rebecca's handshake was limp and brief. "I was just telling Tommy how surprised I was to hear he'd gotten married again so quickly. We all thought he'd take more time to process his grief properly." The words stung because Maria had wrestled with the same guilt, but hearing them from this polished stranger made her defensive. "People grieve differently," she said carefully. "Of course, Rebecca agreed with false sweetness, though one has to wonder about the timing and the circumstances. Tom stepped forward, his voice firm but polite. Rebecca, I appreciate you stopping by, but this isn't really a good time. Oh, but I have so much to catch up on, Rebecca said, ignoring his hint. I've been living in Dallas for the past 2 years, working for my father's oil company. Maid. Quite a success of myself, actually. I always wondered what might have happened if I hadn't moved away when I did. The implication hung in the air like smoke. Maria felt Lucy move closer to her side, the little girl's instincts picking up on the tension even if she didn't understand its source. Things worked out the way they were supposed to, Tom said firmly. I'm happy with my life now. Rebecca's laugh was light and musical, but there was steel underneath it. Are you, though? Really? I mean, this is all very practical, isn't it? Two people in difficult situations making the best of things? Maria's face burned with embarrassment and anger. Excuse me, she said quietly. Lucy, why don't you show Sophia the new chickens? As Maria walked toward the door with both children, she heard Rebecca's voice drop to what she probably thought was a whisper. Tommy, you don't have to settle. You're a successful, attractive man. You could have any woman you wanted. Why tie yourself down to someone else's baggage when you could have a real partner? Someone who chose you, not for your bank account? Maria's steps faltered, but Lucy tugged on her hand. Mama, that lady is mean, she whispered. She's making you sad. Some people just don't understand our family, Maria said. Forcing a smile for her daughter's sake, they spent an hour outside, Lucy playing with the chickens while Maria tried to process the encounter. Rebecca's words had hit every insecurity she'd been trying to suppress. Was she just a burden Tom had taken on out of obligation? Had she trapped him in a life he didn't really want? When they finally returned to the house, Rebecca's car was gone, but Tom was sitting at the kitchen table with his head in his hands. He looked up when they entered, his expression troubled. Maria, I'm sorry about that. Rebecca has always been difficult. She's beautiful, Maria said, trying to keep her voice neutral, and successful. She's also selfish and shallow, Tom replied firmly. She left when I needed her most after Rosa died. She couldn't handle the mess and responsibility of real life. But she's right about one thing, Maria said quietly, settling Sophia in her high chair. This is practical. You could have chosen anyone. Tom stood up and moved closer, his voice gentle but serious. Maria, look at me. She reluctantly met his eyes. I didn't choose you because I was desperate, he said. I chose you because in one afternoon you showed me more kindness and genuine care than Rebecca showed me in 2 years of dating. You took care of my daughter like she was your own, without hesitation, without asking for anything in return. That's not settling, that's finding something real. Lucy, who had been pretending not to listen while feeding crackers to Sophia, suddenly spoke up. Why was that lady so mean? Doesn't she know we're a family now? Tom knelt down to Lucy's level. Some people don't understand that families can come together in different ways. They think there's only one right way to find love and happiness. But we are happy, Lucy said matter-of-factly. Sophia laughs all the time now, and Mama doesn't cry at night anymore, and you read me stories about horses. That lady just doesn't get it. The wisdom of an 8-year-old cut straight to the heart of the matter. They were happy. It might not be the fairy tale romance that movies portrayed, but it was real and good and growing stronger every day. That evening, after the children were in bed, Tom and Maria sat on the porch swing, sharing a quiet moment under the stars. Do you ever regret it? Maria asked softly. This arrangement we made? Tom was quiet for a long moment, considering his answer carefully. I regret that Rosa died. I regret that Carlos died. I regret that our children had to experience such loss so young, but this, us? No, Maria, I don't regret this at all. A month later, more challenges arose when Carlos's parents, Elena and Roberto, returned with a lawyer. They demanded formal visitation rights with Lucy and questioned whether their granddaughter was receiving proper care in her new environment. The legal meeting was tense and uncomfortable. Elena sat rigid in the lawyer's office, listing her complaints about Lucy's new living situation. She objected to Lucy calling anyone but Carlos daddy, worried about the influence of a stranger's baby on her granddaughter, and suggested that Maria was using Lucy to secure her position in a wealthy household. "My client has significant concerns about the rushed nature of this marriage," the lawyer said smoothly. "The timing suggests this was a marriage of convenience rather than love, which raises questions about the stability of the home environment." Tom's lawyer, a sharp woman named Patricia Wells, responded calmly. "The child is thriving in a two-parent household with financial stability, educational opportunities, and strong emotional support. The court's primary concern is the child's best interests, not the timing of her parents' marriage." Lucy herself ended the dispute during a brief interview with the family court counselor. When asked about her preferences, she spoke clearly and confidently about her new life, her love for both Tom and Sophia, and her desire to stay with her mother. The counselor noted Lucy's obvious happiness and adjustment in her report. The grandparents were granted monthly supervised visits, but their bid for custody was denied. Elena left the courthouse in tears, but Roberto squeezed Maria's hand and whispered, "Take care of our girl. I can see she's happy." The first sign that something was wrong came on a Tuesday morning in December. Sophia, now 8 months old, woke up with a slight fever and seemed unusually fussy during her morning feeding. Maria thought it might be teething since the baby had been drooling more than usual and trying to chew on everything she could reach. "She feels a little warm," Maria told Tom as he prepared to head out to check on the cattle. "But babies get fevers all the time. I'll keep an eye on her." Tom kissed Sophia's forehead, his brow furrowing with concern. "Call Dr. Martinez if you're worried. I'll have my phone on me." By lunchtime, Sophia's fever had climbed higher. She refused her bottle and cried weakly, a sound that made Maria's stomach clench with worry. This wasn't the strong, angry crying of a teething baby. This was the fragile whimper of a sick child. Lucy noticed, too. "Why is Sophia so quiet, Mama? Usually she tries to grab my hair when I lean over her crib." "She's not feeling well, sweetie," Maria said, trying to keep the growing panic out of her voice. "Why don't you play quietly in your room while I call the doctor?" Dr. Martinez's nurse told Maria to bring Sophia in right away. The baby's breathing seemed more labored during the 20-minute drive to town, and by the time they reached the clinic, Maria was fighting back tears of fear. Dr. Martinez, a kind older man who had delivered half the babies in their county, examined Sophia with gentle but thorough hands. His expression grew more serious as he listened to her chest and checked her oxygen levels. "I'm hearing sounds in her lungs that concern me," he said quietly. "Her oxygen saturation is lower than I'd like. I think we're looking at pneumonia, and at her age, that means she needs to be in the hospital." The word hospital hit Maria like a physical blow. "Is she going to be okay?" "Pneumonia in infants is serious but very treatable," Dr. Martinez assured her. "The hospital in the city has an excellent pediatric unit. I'm calling ahead to let them know you're coming." Maria's hands shook as she called Tom from the clinic parking lot. "Tom, we need to go to the hospital. Sophia has pneumonia." The line went quiet for a heartbeat before Tom's voice came back, rough with emotion. "I'm on my way. Don't leave without me." Tom arrived at the clinic in record time, his truck skidding slightly on the gravel as he parked. He rushed in to find Maria holding Sophia, who was breathing fast and shallow. The sight of his tiny daughter looking so fragile broke something inside his chest. "How bad is it?" he asked Dr. Martinez, his voice barely steady. "She needs oxygen and 4 antibiotics," the doctor explained. "Children her age can go downhill quickly with pneumonia, but they also respond well to treatment. The next 24 to 48 hours will tell us a lot." The drive to the regional hospital was the longest hour of their lives. Maria sat in the back seat holding Sophia, monitoring every breath while Tom drove with white knuckles gripping the steering wheel. Lucy, who had insisted on coming despite their suggestion she stay with neighbors, sat quietly beside Maria, occasionally reaching over to touch Sophia's tiny hand. She's going to be okay, right, Mama? Lucy whispered. The doctors are going to take very good care of her, Maria replied. Hoping her voice sounded more confident than she felt, the pediatric emergency room was a blur of activity. Nurses whisked Sophia away to get her settled with oxygen and 4 lines, while Tom handled the insurance paperwork. Maria felt lost without the baby in her arms. Pacing the waiting room like a caged animal. Dr. Sarah Chun, the pediatric specialist, came to speak with them after Sophia was admitted. She was a small woman with kind eyes and a calm manner that immediately put them at ease. Sophia is responding well to the oxygen, she reported. Her fever is coming down and her breathing is already showing improvement. We caught this early, which makes a big difference. Can we see her? Tom asked. Of course. She's in the pediatric ICU, which sounds scarier than it is. We just want to monitor her closely for the next day or two. The sight of Sophia in the hospital crib, with tubes and wires connected to her tiny body, broke both Tom and Maria's hearts. She looked so small and vulnerable under the bright hospital lights. Lucy stood on her tiptoes to see over the crib rail, her eyes wide with worry. Why? Does she have all those wires? Lucy asked softly. They're helping the doctors make sure she's getting better, Tom explained, his voice thick with emotion. Like a special computer that watches over her. That first night was the hardest. Tom and Maria took turns holding Sophia when the nurses allowed it, while Lucy curled up in the hospital chair, refusing to go home despite their suggestions. None of them could bear to leave, even though Sophia slept most of the time, exhausted from fighting the infection. I should have brought her in sooner, Maria whispered as she held Sophia during the quiet midnight hours. I thought it was just teething. You couldn't have known, Tom said firmly. You did everything right, Dr. Martinez said so. But what? If I had waited longer, what if she had gotten worse? Tom moved his chair closer to Maria's, their knees touching. She didn't get worse. She's here, she's getting better, and that's what matters. It was during those long hospital hours that the careful walls they had built around their feelings began to crumble. Fear had a way of stripping away pretense and revealing what really mattered. When Sophia's oxygen levels dipped during the second night, both Tom and Maria felt the same desperate terror. When she finally turned the corner on the third day, smiling weakly and reaching for Maria's face, they both cried with relief. Lucy surprised everyone with her maturity during the crisis. She helped the nurses by fetching ice chips and keeping other families' children entertained in the waiting room. She read stories to Sophia even when the baby was too sick to respond, convinced that her voice would help her sister get better. Sophia needs to hear that we're all here, Lucy explained to a nurse who commented on her devotion. Family voices are the best medicine. On the fourth day, Dr. Chun had good news. Her lungs are clear, her fever's been gone for 24 hours, and she's taking her bottles normally again. I think we can send this little fighter home tomorrow. The relief was overwhelming. Tom actually had to sit down, his legs shaky with the sudden release of tension. Maria clutched Sophia closer, breathing in the sweet baby scent that had been masked by hospital smells for too long that evening. As they prepared for their last night in the hospital, Tom and Maria found themselves really talking for the first time since their marriage. Lucy was asleep in the chair, and Sophia was peacefully nursing, finally back to her normal routine. I was terrified, Tom admitted quietly. Not just about losing Sophia, but about losing all of this, our family. I realized I couldn't imagine going back to the way things were before. Maria looked at him in surprise. I thought this was still just a practical arrangement for you. It started that way, Tom said honestly. But somewhere along the way, it became real, you became real. Watching you care for Sophia, seeing how Lucy has blossomed, being part of a family again. I don't want to lose any of it. I love her, Maria said softly, looking down at Sophia. I love her like she's mine. I love Lucy's confidence and happiness. I love the life we've built together. And me? Tom asked quietly. How do you feel about me? Maria met his eyes, her own shining. With unshed tears, I love you too, she whispered. I didn't expect it, didn't plan for it, but I do. You're not just Lucy's father figure or Sophia's dad. You're my partner, my friend, my husband, Tom finished softly. Your real husband. Lucy stirred in her chair and opened one sleepy eye. Are you guys finally admitting you love each other? She asked with the bluntness of a child. Because it's been pretty obvious for months. They all laughed softly, trying not to wake the other families in the pediatric ward. Even Sophia seemed to smile in her sleep, as if she knew that her family had finally found their way to each other completely. The next morning, as they prepared to take Sophia home, Dr. Chun pulled them aside. I have to say, in 20 years of pediatric medicine, I've rarely seen a family pull together during a crisis the way yours did. That little girl is lucky to have parents who love her so completely. We're the lucky ones, Tom said, putting his arm around Maria's shoulders. All of us. The drive home was different from the terrifying trip 4 days earlier. Sophia babbled. Happily in her car seat, Lucy chattered about all the things she wanted to show her sister when they got home, and Tom and Maria held hands across the center console. They had gone to the hospital as a family held together by necessity and kindness. They were returning home as a family bound together by love. 1 year and 3 months after their courthouse wedding, Tom and Maria sat on their front porch swing, watching the most beautiful sight either had ever seen. Lucy, now 9 years old and confident beyond her years, was carefully leading 8-month-old Sophia around the yard, both girls giggling as they chased butterflies in the late afternoon sun. Look, Mama, Lucy called out. Sophia almost caught one. Sophia toddled after her big sister on unsteady legs, babbling happily in the mix of Spanish and English that had become the soundtrack of their household. The baby had fully recovered from her bout with pneumonia 6 months earlier, and if anything seemed even more vibrant and healthy than before. Hard to believe she was ever sick, Tom said softly, echoing Maria's thoughts. Hard to believe any of this, Maria replied, settling deeper into the curve of Tom's arm. The casual intimacy that had developed between them still surprised her sometimes. They had evolved from polite strangers to genuine partners without either of them quite noticing when the shift happened. Tom was quiet for a moment, watching his daughters play. Maria, I've been thinking about something for weeks now. What's that? She asked, though something in his tone made her turn to look at him fully. This arrangement we made, he began carefully. This practical marriage we agreed to. I don't think it exists anymore. Maria felt her heart skip. What do you mean? I mean, somewhere along the way, this became real. We became real, and I think it's time we acknowledged that. Tom turned to face her completely, his brown eyes serious, but warm. I think it's time we had a real wedding. The suggestion hung in the air between them like a promise. Maria felt tears prick her eyes as she considered what he was really asking. You want to marry me again? She whispered. I want to marry you for real this time, Tom corrected gently. I want to stand in front of our family and friends and promise to love you, not just help you. I want Lucy and Sophia to see their parents choose each other because we want to, not because we have to. Maria's heart was racing, but she needed to be sure this was right for all of them. What about Lucy? She's been through so much change already. As if summoned by her mother's concern, Lucy appeared at the porch steps. Sophia balanced on her hip with the ease of an experienced big sister. What are you guys talking about? Lucy asked with 9-year-old directness. Tom and Maria exchanged a look, then Tom gestured for Lucy to come closer. We were talking about having a real wedding ceremony. What would you think about that? Lucy's face lit up immediately. You mean like with a white dress and flowers and everything? Exactly like that, Maria said, surprised by her daughter's enthusiasm. And I could be the maid of honor? Lucy asked excitedly. And Sophia could be the flower girl? Well, she's pretty little for flower girl duties, Tom said with a chuckle. But I bet she'd look adorable in a frilly dress trying to scatter petals. Lucy set Sophia down on the porch, where the toddler immediately began climbing into Tom's lap. I think it's perfect, Lucy declared. You guys love each other for real now, not just because you needed help. Everyone should know that. Her innocent wisdom struck both adults. Lucy had watched their relationship grow from practical partnership to genuine love, and she understood better than anyone how far they'd all come. "So you'd be okay with it?" Maria asked. "It wouldn't feel like we were somehow betraying Daddy's memory?" Lucy considered this with the seriousness she brought to all important matters. "I think Daddy would be happy that we found a family that loves us, and Tom's not trying to replace Daddy, he's just Tom, our Tom." That evening, after the girls were in bed, Tom and Maria sat at their kitchen table making plans. Not the practical, careful negotiations of their first arrangement, but the excited, hopeful plans of two people who had found love in the most unexpected place. "I want to do this right," Tom said, pulling out a notepad. "Real invitations, real flowers, real vows that we write ourselves." "The community center has that beautiful garden area," Maria suggested. "We could have an outdoor ceremony." "And Mrs. Patterson makes the best wedding cakes in 3 counties," Tom added. "Remember the one she made for the Hendersons' anniversary party? They talked late into the night, planning everything from the guest list to the music." Maria wanted Carlos's parents included, hoping that Elena would finally see how happy and stable their family had become. Tom wanted his ranch hands there, the men who had become like brothers to him over the years. "What about your dress?" Tom asked. "I know most of our budget has gone to practical things, but for this ... I want to buy something new," Maria said firmly. "Something white and beautiful that I choose because I'm marrying the man I love, not because I'm solving a problem." The next morning they told Sophia about the wedding plans, though at 18 months she was more interested in the promise of cake than the ceremony itself. But when Maria mentioned getting her a pretty dress, Sophia clapped her hands and babbled something that sounded suspiciously like pretty. The weeks leading up to the wedding were a whirlwind of happy preparation. Lucy threw herself into helping with every detail, from addressing invitations to picking out flowers. She insisted on personally inviting her teacher, her best friends, family, and practically everyone she met at the grocery store. "Lucy's telling the whole town," Maria reported to Tom one evening. "Mrs. Henderson at the post office knows more about our wedding plans than we do." "Let her be excited," Tom said, pulling Maria close for one of the casual kisses that had become natural between them. "This is her celebration too." The most surprising support came from an unexpected source. Carlos's mother Elena called 3 days before the wedding, her voice uncertain but sincere. "Maria, I owe you an apology," Elena said. "I was so angry about losing Carlos that I couldn't see how much you were hurting too. I couldn't see that you were doing what was best for Lucy." "Elena, you don't have to." "Yes, I do," Elena interrupted. "Roberto and I want to come to the wedding. We want to support your family. Lucy is thriving and you're happy. That's what Carlos would have wanted." Maria cried after that phone call, feeling like a weight she hadn't even realized she was carrying had been lifted from her shoulders. The morning of the wedding dawned bright and clear, with the kind of perfect spring weather that felt like a blessing. Maria stood in front of her bedroom mirror, wearing a simple but elegant white dress that made her feel beautiful for the first time in years. Lucy helped her with her hair, both of them laughing when Sophia tried to help by grabbing at the curling iron. "You look like a princess, Mama," Lucy said, stepping back to admire their work. "We all look like princesses," Maria replied, straightening Lucy's lavender dress and Sophia's tiny white outfit with its ridiculous number of ruffles. The ceremony was everything they had dreamed it would be. The community center's garden was filled with people who genuinely cared about their family's happiness. Elena and Roberto sat in the front row, Elena dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. Tom's ranch hands had cleaned up remarkably well, wearing their best boots and looking proud of their boss. But the moment that made everyone tear up was when Lucy walked down the aisle ahead of Maria, carrying Sophia and whispering instructions about dropping flower petals. Sophia managed to scatter exactly 3 petals before deciding it was more fun to wave at the guests. But her delighted giggles made everyone smile. Tom waited at the altar in a new suit that made him look even more handsome than usual, his eyes never leaving Maria's face as she walked toward him. This time there was no nervousness, no uncertainty, Just love and joy, and the absolute certainty that they were exactly where they belonged. Their vows were simple but heartfelt. Tom promised to love Maria and Lucy, to be the father and husband their family deserved, and to never take for granted the gift of their love. Maria promised to love Tom and Sophia, to build a life filled with laughter and support, and to never forget how lucky they were to have found each other. "You may kiss your bride," the minister said with a smile. This kiss was nothing like their polite peck at the courthouse. This was the kiss of two people who had chosen each other completely, who had built something beautiful from the ashes of their separate sorrows. The reception was a community celebration, with everyone contributing something to make the day special. There was dancing under string lights, speeches that made everyone laugh and cry, and enough food to feed twice the number of guests they had. But the moment Maria treasured most came near the end of the evening. She found Tom sitting at a table with Sophia on his lap and Lucy beside him, all three of them watching the other guests dance. "No regrets?" she asked, settling beside her husband. "Only one," Tom said seriously. Maria's heart skipped. "What's that?" "I wish we had figured this out sooner," he said, smiling. "I wish we hadn't wasted so much time being scared of what we were feeling." Lucy looked up from the piece of cake she was sharing with Sophia. "But if you had figured it out too soon, you might not have appreciated it as much," she said with startling insight. Sometimes the best things are worth waiting for. As they drove home that night, Sophia asleep in her car seat and Lucy chattering about her favorite parts of the day, Maria reflected on the incredible journey that had brought them to this moment.